Hey guys, and welcome back to the Path to Exile Podcast, episode 37, partnered with Mobalytics. I am Cal Torak, and joining me per usual is Miso Shiro. Dead Rabbit is on vacation this week. He will be back next week. But if you're new here, we have our audio-only formats on Apple Music and Spotify. So if you don't want to watch us or you want to listen to us while you're at the gym or something, check us out over there, and please give us a rating. It'll help us out a lot. This week, we have a very special guest, Crimson Cass. Most of you probably saw him from his AGDQ cast and Gormus's Speed Run. But for those of you that don't know who Crimson Cass is, go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit of your background, because I know you did Diablo 4 speedrunning before this, right?
Yeah, so my name is Crimson Cast. I'm an ARPG speedrunner and speedrun commentator, I guess. Before I played Path of Exile 2, my other ARPGs, my introduction to the genre was Diablo 2 back in the day, watching some older cousins play. I was born in 95, so when Diablo 2 was out and in its prime, I was too young to play myself, but occasionally got away with watching college-aged cousins play it in the early 2000s. And then I played Dota 2, which is how I got into shoutcasting. I used to shoutcast friends playing in amateur Dota 2 tournaments, and we could talk about that if people are curious. And then when Diablo 4 came out, I got into speedrunning myself by going to speedrun.com and watching the Diablo 4 world records and being really unimpressed and thinking, okay, there's no way I'm actually better than this guy. And then going and trying it, and in a few attempts getting my first world record, and then I've been an addict to ARPG speedrunning since then, after being a fan for a long, long time.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, we're going to be diving into all of that. We're going to dive into the casting as well as the speedrun aspect. Sure, plenty of it. But before we get into it, what have you been up to lately besides are you just like purely on the PoE 2 grind right now? Just like always practicing the speedrunning?
So League launch is the second most exciting time of the patch for me. So like right now is prime time because we're in the middle of race season. So right now I'm doing a lot of different things because I'm commentating one of the races this week. I have a personal mission to do a couple of full playthroughs on classes that I haven't done the speedrun tech for, so that way I can provide more well-rounded insight into everything. So like right now is prime time, I'm on the grind, but between League launch and now there was a gap where I was playing like a ton of Counter-Strike and Baldur's Gate 3 and Dota and other stuff. So my off season is kind of weird. I have two peaks, League launch and then race season, and my lulls are sort of offset from the rest of the content creator community.
Right on. Right on. Miso, I'm gonna glaze Miso up a bit right now. I genuinely think Miso is my favorite Path of Exile 2 content creator. He is the only one that consistently posts content the entire league. Even when he's playing other games, he's still doing PoE 2 content, but he also does content that's just fun. Like, it's not just strictly the guide content. He does the meme content. His April Fool's video was awesome. So I just want to give my love to you, Miso. I just love all the content you do, man. Keep it up. What have you been up to besides, the content grind? Your April Fool's joke was hilarious, by the way. I freaking loved it.
Damn, dude. Make me blush. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, just still playing Crimson Desert. I've been sucked in, addicted. I'm almost done with the story, and that's me kind of like starting to actually like beeline the story. So almost like 100 hours into the game and about to finish the story. And there's way more stuff to do in the game, even beyond that. But I think I'm going to be swapping back to Path of Exile 2 very soon, probably sometime next week, because we are approaching the news cycle season. So going to start doing like campaign runs, covering any news. I opened up Twitch today. DM was streaming Path of Exile 2, so I think we are kind of back in the full swing of things very, very soon. So I'm super excited about that. But yeah, April Fool's video went out yesterday. I was contemplating whether I should do it or not before it went up, because the video before that, where I was, Jonathan Rogers with the quality of life stuff, was. I didn't intend for it to be like an April Fool's video, but I feel like some people are like, oh, this is early April Fool's. I'm like, oh, I guess people are taking this as like an April Fool's video. So I was like, it felt kind of weird to have like two like fake videos, like quote unquote. But the Jonathan Rogers video was just like, I had some ideas for what I wanted to do for like what I think they should do for quality of life changes for the game, but it felt like if I were to do a regular video, it would feel like a little ranty or just like going on about being very nitpicky. So I just wanted to find like a fun way to do it. But
that was awesome. That was an awesome video, by the way.
Thank you. But yeah, just playing some Crimson Desert right now. Looking forward to hopping back into PoE 2.
Right on. Yeah, I had started. I forget the name. It's called like Randomizer or something. I don't remember if I talked about it last week's episode, but there's a website someone made that generates PoE build challenges, and I had started one of those. But then the guy that reached out to Rabbit about his Adonia's Ego Shaman auto loot bomber Blade Zero, he reached out to me, and when I was streaming once, and he was like, "Hey, I think I want to set up this weird build using Thorns as a defensive layer," and we started like pushing this Thorns concept. It's ended up being an absurdly overpowered Thorns build. Like it one-shots Uber Arbiter, and we think it can one-shot group Uber Arbiter. It's definitely getting nerfed because there's no way Adonia's Ego survives the patch, but it ended up being a fun build craft. But I'm back in the swing of playing PoE 2, and this weekend, I think Anthony is doing another private league, so I might be diving into that just to get... I like league start practice. And I love the fresh economy stuff. So I'm probably going to be playing just Anthony's private league this weekend. Crimson, you did a April Fool's video, by the way. I was featured in it. Thank you for letting me collaborate with you. But go watch Crimson Cast's April Fool's video. It is really well made. It is hilarious. I hope it ends up getting more views. I hope people start reacting to it because I really liked it, man.
Yeah, thank you. That video... I don't know what I expected in terms of viewership. I'm pretty pleased. It's my best performing first 24 hours of all time. But the comments have a split of like half of people really want to feel like they're smarter than the joke. And so they go like, this is just an April Fool's joke. You're not tricking me. And then another significant contingent of people are like playing along where they're like, how could you betray us like this? I trusted you.
Yeah.
But there's like a tiny fraction of people who are like extremely mad. And I just can't believe it. It blows my mind that people would watch that video and one, not realize it's a joke, or two, like be upset that we're joking about the concept of a streamer plant. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the video too much. Please go watch it. But yeah, it's very obvious because Farmer isn't even trying. He's just like straight up like looking at the script he's reading. It just
I was
funny.
I was 80% of the way through the edit when Farmer sent me that, and I watched his take, and I was like, "This is too pure for me to not include." But like, I gave people like a deadline, and then he sent it to me like almost like 24 hours past the deadline, which I thought was great. Which I thought, like, it was just, I mean, I've done that to people too, right? Like, we're all like that sometimes, but at the same time, I watched the take and I was like, this is the most phoning it in thing. It's perfect. I love Farmer.
It was perfect. Yeah, I thought it was a great edit. We'll have it linked down below. Let's dive into I guess let's just talk about commentating. I used to do esports for a while. I did a lot of stuff in esports, from managing to tournament adminning, but I did a lot of commentating for StarCraft and Heroes of the Storm. And for me, I always had a special part in my heart for analytical commentators. It is very hard to not only, like, to be a good commentator, the amount of work that goes into it is a lot more intense than people realize. It is so much, like, you don't just have to speak well on camera. You have to be able to communicate well with your co-caster. You have to be an analytical commentator, you have to play the game at a high level. And then beyond that, a good analytical commentator does research on all the other players. So he can tell you everything about everyone, not just, what class they play, but how they play the class, at what level brackets they do stuff differently. And the amount of work, like, I used to go to events with binders, and like the amount of work you can put into just player research is crazy. Just take the moment to like gas yourself up as much as you want. Like, tell us the amount of work and preparation you do as a commentator and what it means for you to be a good commentator. Because when I look at what you do, it's very impressive. You're a very, very like good analytical commentator, and good analytical commentators are hard to come by, in my opinion.
Thank you. So it is a lot of work, but it's also not too dissimilar from like how I think you guys might approach the game in general. Like, for example, like on a league start, you might receive a Discord DM from a friend or a fellow content creator going like, hey, I think this might be tech. And it's a clip of someone's build, and you don't really have a tree, but you can try to reverse engineer it. Like a good example of this that you guys might remember is in the beginning of 0.3, there was some contention between various people about whether or not shield wall was like a skill that you could actually use in general gameplay. Like I think it was Noogie that was like the first major content creator to be like, no, shield wall's actually going to be good. Like when we just had numbers on a page. And then I remember the first week of League launch of 0.3, I kept seeing like Exiled Again YouTube shorts or like random stuff from the non-English language player base, and it just gets sent around. And the speedrun community, our goals in gameplay are different. Like we're not trying to find a mapping build, we're trying to find a really hyper-optimized level build. But that same sort of flow of discovering stuff is not too dissimilar to what you guys would probably have in your DMs, where someone finds a new skill interaction and sends it to you, or like tells you like, hey, you've got to go read this support gem because it looks like it may interact in a weird way. Someone needs to test this. As far as what the prep process is like, GDQ was a really interesting example because for anyone who doesn't know, Games Done Quick is the world's largest speedrunning marathon. It's a charity event that's raised more than $25 million for charity since its inception in the early 2010s. And what it is it's a gameplay showcase of high-level speedrunning in as many different games as they can fit into a week. This time it was 168 games, if I remember correctly. And so what you're doing as a commentator for that is you're trying to explain the game systems to people who may have never seen it before. The expected live audience is around 50 to 80,000, and most of those people have not seen Path of Exile before. So I have to decide as the commentator, like, how do I explain the concept of a systems ARPG? Something where you have skill and support gems and a giant passive tree and a bunch of skill interactions and what is an ascendancy and all these other sort of basic first day of playing systems things to an audience that's never seen it before. And also explain that some of those systems are going to be deliberately broken or abused by a speedrunner who's looking to get away with stuff. The way that I structured the commentary for that, which I'm glad no one seems to have realized, is I had one core game system per zone. So like in the Grim Tangle, you hear me actually say it out loud. Oh, and in the Grim Tangle, we're going to talk about some of the movement tech. And so then I explained what sprinting is, why Angormus is taking off his chest piece, how sprint knockdown works, and like a couple of other things there. Pounce, for example, was also explained in the Grim Tangle. And so what I had was a notebook that I had spent a couple of weeks prepping for, where I went like, this zone we explain what a skill gem is. This zone we explain what a support gem is. This zone we explain what an ascendancy is. This zone we explain the movement tech. This zone we explain the bossing tech, and so on and so forth. So that way we can get through the whole thing. And that took like hundreds of hours probably, because there was like a good example of this, of like a silly thing that you may not think about as someone who's receiving the commentary, is, do support gems empower skills? Do support gems customize skills? Do support gems modify skills? And like, for the first time audience, hearing that a support gem just makes you more powerful doesn't capture the idea of like how cadence works on Leap Slam. Because it doesn't make Leap Slam stronger, it makes it faster. Or how does magnified area work? It doesn't make it do more damage, it makes it larger. And so I have such a high density of concepts to explain. Figuring out whether I want to use the word empower or customize or upgrade takes a lot of iteration to then talk to people that I know who are gamers but not into PoE 2 and ask them how they understand different things that I'm explaining. Prepping for the races is much, much easier. Because like, the typical person who's watching a race has 1,000 hours in the game and has played multiple classes, and then I can get into like funny on-tree interactions that you may not expect, or like how zone reading works, or much more technical stuff. So prepping for GDQ was way harder than prepping for races, where I'm essentially just like collecting different people's path of buildings or planners and like doing 1 or 2 runs of each class myself in order to sort of provide a bit more insight.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't realize you had done that prep to that extent for AGDQ, because yeah, that's a good thing. I've never experienced that as a commentator myself, where I'm like intentionally casting to like every time you cast an event, it's for if you're watching an esports tournament, you're probably not a casual fan, right? At that point, you're pretty all in, so you're never really thinking about that. That's impressive, man. That's cool.
Yeah. GDQ was a fun and unique challenge, but I'm glad that the race audience I get to be much more, the way you talk to the boys, right? Like it's gonna be great to sort of be able to get into the nitty gritty of the stuff that I care about that the broader player base can probably relate to.
Makes me think of that year that Dota, the international, basically Worlds of Dota. It was broadcast on ESPN, and then they had to kind of include a lot of those explanations that you wouldn't normally have to make for the game, just because they're expecting like, hey, these normies are going to be watching it on ESPN, so they're going to need a little bit of explanation and background about like what these things are and like the basics of like what this skill does, what's a stun and things like that. So I can only imagine how much prep work it went into that one as well for those casters.
I think there's a funny example like this from Counter-Strike where over the last about year and a half, the most dominant team in Counter-Strike is a French brand, but they have a British player named Mezzi. And Mezzi was the first British player to win a major, if memory serves. And he got interviewed on like mainstream news outlets. And Counter-Strike, for anyone who doesn't know, is a first-person shooter about terrorists trying to plant a bomb and counter-terrorists trying to either prevent the planting or defuse the bomb. But that doesn't play well on like mainstream news. So Mezzi had to come up with a way to explain the concept of Counter-Strike without using the words terrorist, counter-terrorist, bomb, plant, or defuse. And it ended up being the attackers and defenders who are trying to place the objective and disable the objective.
Yeah, the audience you're talking to, it matters a lot. I hope people like that. That's a cool. I didn't realize the amount of prep you're doing into ADGQ specifically. What does it mean to be a good commentator for you, though?
I mean, you always admire the thing that you're not good at, right? Like, so when I think of commentators that I would like to adopt the skill set of, a lot of the people that I feel I could, hold up against, maybe I'm not on this level, but like there are a lot of famous Dota casters who are like fast action summarizers. A giant complicated team fight breaks out and they're able to just describe everything super fluidly at 500 words per minute. That I think I can push in that direction. I don't think I'm at the level of the very top guys. But the people that I'm like really jealous of is the people who can weave a narrative out of thin air. Like there's some famous examples in Counter-Strike, which is a completely non-narrative game, and they create a sense of story and place out of a really mechanically straightforward game. And so for me, in the case of casting something like an ARPG or a MOBA, adding like technical insight is something that the audience is looking for a lot. But the stuff that I'm jealous of is the people who create a sense of like weight and gravitas and narrative that gets the audience like more immersed. And that's the stuff that I like really admire.
Yeah. I got Tastosis. Have you ever watched StarCraft commentary? Tasteless and Artosis, they're a duo that comes to mind when you say that. That's cool.
I'm thinking of the examples of like Machine and Sponge are the people that are at the absolute top of just like weaving a mythos out of thin air in Counter-Strike. And those people, when I watch those are, I'm locked in. I'm locked in as a viewer when I watch those guys.
Before we fully dive into race discussion, just what are your general thoughts on Fate of the Vow as a whole?
The league mechanic is not for me. Not because I don't like complicated systems things. Like I think the temple, when it goes core, when the balance changes, I think the system is good. I like the system. Obviously it's a bit overtuned, but like no one needs to hear my comments on that. But if I were mapping, I would probably be like much more looking for like abyssal overrun maps and like multi-breach maps and a lot of that more dense content like that, where there's a lot more immediacy to having a build that can clear everything and getting the reward that way. So like Fate of the Vol as a mechanic is probably not my favorite mapping mechanic, but I think the League overall is pretty good. I think that the Druid, or rather not even the Druid, Primal skills add a lot of stuff to builds that's really interesting, both in the speedrunning setup and also in endgame. I think that Primal skills are probably the best, most diverse skills that we've seen added to the game. It adds a lot more than the Huntress did when the Huntress was introduced, so I think that it's like good in short.
Yeah, I think just most people in general agree Druid skills have been just great for the game.
They're
Yeah.
cool. They're cool speedrunning things with them that I'll be talking about on the cast this weekend. So if people are curious what I mean by like speedrun tech with the Druid skills, some stuff is obvious, like Pounce lets you move faster. Some stuff is non-obvious that I hope that people get some insight to this weekend.
I can only think of Pounce, honestly. My simpleton brain is like, oh, Pounce, real good for running through campaign fast.
So, like a good example that you may not think of is the various ranged classes. If you're playing bows or crossbows while leveling, there was no easy way to generate rage, and rage is just straight up more damage. And
Yeah.
so, Ferocious Roar, if you just put it on your weapon swap and you have a level 1 talisman, you press Ferocious Roar every 8 seconds, and you have max rage immediately in any boss fight. So, like, it's one extra button worth of clunk. There's some more complicated stuff with cross slash activates marks regardless of their activation condition. And so if you put any mark on a boss, voltaic mark and freezing mark are the ones that people use. You can actually put those inside of Pounce, and when the boss shows up, you can pounce on the boss to mark them, and then cross slash them to activate the mark, even if you haven't frozen or electrocuted them, in the case of freezing and voltaic mark. And then you get huge amounts of gain, right? So there are all these damage multipliers that you can just pick up if you're willing to spend 1 or 2 extra buttons setting up at the beginning of your boss fight and get a 30% damage multiplier just by having an extra level skill gem drop to you, level 7 skill gem drop to you, which is a big deal for speedrunning consistency, just picking up these multipliers. The easiest thing is if you were leveling on any weapon-based build that already didn't have rage generation, just put a talisman in your back pocket, press Ferocious Roar at the beginning of the fight, and now you have max rage. And like that's just more damage.
I was
Yeah.
I was watching
ahead.
people on the race at the beginning use just like bear form and swipe, regardless if they were melee or range, to just generate
Yep.
rage during that.
Yep.
That was kind of cool. I was like,
Yep.
why are they swapping over to bear? It's not doing as much damage to regular attacks. That's weird. And it's like, oh, they're generating rage.
Yes. Or I mean, in the case of super early game stuff, if you're talking about like, you know, the first 3 or 4 zones when you get into Red Veil, it's not even the rage generation. It's if you drop a good two-handed weapon of any kind. If you're a warrior and a crossbow drops, or if you're a mercenary and a mace drops, if it has a good flat damage prefix, it's just going to do more damage than your white base weapon is gonna, and you probably don't have a transmute yet to upgrade what you're holding. So a lot of times you'll see people in the absolute beginning, you'll see a warrior just like finds a decent quarterstaff, and they're using that for those first couple of fights against Bira and Ariadne in the absolute beginning, before you have enough points on tree to like really differentiate projectile damage versus melee damage. Because at level 2, 10% increased projectile damage isn't enough to overwhelm the difference between a good mace and a bad crossbow. So
Yeah. That's cool. I've always wondered how long that on the fly play roll lasts, where you're able to extend, like if you got a really good quarterstaff, you know, how long until you're like, you know, you're going to eventually swap the crossbows grenades. I've always wondered what the lifeline for those was. I'm glad you talked about it a bit. Rage is super important. Go ahead.
In principle, it can go on super long. In principle. No one actually does this, but there have been POBs shared of like, if you drop a Widow Hail on a mercenary, how long should you play bows? And the answer is the entire time, but you have to have a backup Widow Hail build planned.
Right. I've always wondered if anyone has ever won a race or something like that, or been competitive where it's just like the god items dropped early on, like you just explained a Widow Hail. It's like, well, I guess I'm playing bow this run.
That did happen. There was a top 10 finish out of nowhere in O.2 races when Rake Stomping Ground was a thing and all your damage came from strength stacking. The plan in the first couple of O.2 races was that most people in race 1 were planning on using Stomping Ground to get to some level in the mid-20s and then swapping to their end run build. So like you level up on Stomping Ground and then you switch to Perfect Strike on a Warrior, or you level up on Stomping Ground and then you switch to Grenades on a Mercenary. At the time, those were the best boss killing builds. But the idea was that if you dropped a Meginord's Girdle, you get 40 flat strength, and that's an enormous deal. So you would just keep going, and that did happen to someone. They didn't win. They didn't win the race, but they did hot swap to just like, I'm gonna keep using Stomping Ground.
That was a fun time. The old strength stacking rake stomping ground.
It was toxic, but I miss it.
Yes, it was very, very fast campaign clears on a very cheap budget. That's funny.
I remember at the time it was like everybody was up in arms, like this is literally the best thing in the game. Nobody is gonna play with anything else, and that ended up being the case where everybody, like, no matter where they started, they kind of started Rake Stomping Ground and then maybe eventually got off of it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like when I was watching the race of like crossbows and grenades, but definitely not to the same extent.
This is a whole topic. Grenades are probably not the best leveling build outside of races, and even in races, if you could see my DMs with top racers, no one is actually convinced that grenades are
that's funny.
Definitely the best leveling build. Like, no one thinks that. A lot of people think that there's a pretty close parity between EDC, Bone Storm, Shield Wall, and Grenades, where a like theoretical top skill player who had time to practice all three, we don't know which build would actually come out on top. We know that EDC on Druid is better than it is on Witch or Sork, though, so we know it would be one of the strength or strength hybrid classes that we'd win, but we don't know which one. But the audience seems like if you read the like forum posts when GGG announced races, there are people in there who are like, nerf grenades, any other projectile is completely unusable for leveling. I don't want to play crossbows, I want to play bows, or whatever they're passionate about. And like, it's not that different, Chief. Like, if you take a guy that dies or Angormus and have them switch to playing Lightning Arrow, they would kill Tavakai like 5 minutes slower. Which, like, for your typical person who just wants to get to the map fast on league starts, like, 5 minutes slower doesn't matter if you're having twice as much fun because you really want to play arrows instead of crossbows, or you really want to play spells instead of maces or whatever. Like, the build difference, the build hierarchy right now, we have one really good ranged build in Grenades, we have one really good melee build in Shield Wall, and we have one really good spell build in Essence Ring Contagion. And it would be nice to see multiple options in each of those ranged melee and caster archetypes. But the idea that like you have to level crossbows is just wrong. Like, that's just not true.
I remember Angormus was playing. He at one point he tried swapping to grenades, but then I think he swapped back.
Yeah,
I hate grenades personally. I'm a mercenary main. I fucking hate grenades. I will always level something else.
Good.
Same.
We need more people putting out leveling guides on bolts and stuff, because like, dude, the obsession with the idea that grenades are the best thing, like, I mean, we'll talk about this during the build of the week session, but like, it's not even true for crossbows. It's just that it's the most practiced thing by the best players. Player diff is a much bigger deal than like archetype or build diff.
True. Yeah, it didn't help that Jungroan made another busted grenade build this patch. That upped the oil grenade or whatever. Flashbang.
Hey, we got that banned for the races though. We got that.
That's good.
That banned.
I'm glad it did.
So
I remember with Rake Stomping Ground, people were saying that it should have been banned, and I was talking to Angormus, and he was like, "Yeah, we talked to GGG, and they weren't going to ban it." So I'm glad, at least for this one, which I guess it kind of proves / like shows us it's probably not an interaction that they intended to be in the game.
Oh yeah.
It's gone for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be gone next patch.
Yeah, I mean, so there were actually, I want to point out, there were a couple of racers who wanted Oil Grenade to stay in the races.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And we can talk about that when we talk about like ExileCon stuff, I'm skipping forward in the show notes, but like, there were people who were like, this is great. It removes a lot of item variance, and then it becomes more about like your fight execution and your map reading and other stuff that I can control. I get that perspective, but at the same time, like, it was literally a bug. Like, GGG said it was a bug. I reached out to the community team at one point. I think I was the first speedrunner to like gather community feedback and go to the community team and ask like, is this a bug? And it took 2 days for me to get an answer. And the answer was like, yeah, this is getting removed to 0.5. This is getting nuked from orbit. And there was some clarity there that I really appreciated. Usually when community team reads my message and then takes 2 days to respond, it means that they have to get a hold of a producer to like get the official answer right. So
yeah. And yeah, I'm sure that that will always be a back and forth between community and like the dev team, which is a good thing. Like there should always be that kind of dialogue, and it's good that they're starting to listen. Let's just go ahead and talk about the races and the participation of the races. It is interesting to see this most recent race that a lot of factors led into why a lot of people dropped out. But like when you look at the leaderboard of how many people actually finished the race, it makes me really sad. As somebody who I am not a like competitive racer, but I wouldn't mind like starting to like as a casual start competing in them. But from my perspective, I have almost no interest in it at all right now. And it's because like there's no way I'll be able to like get any of the prizes. And I'm not saying that we need to remove the prizes from the top end, but I think there needs to be more casual rewards. I think that it is a little bit silly that there's no top 100 reward. You see like a lot of people quit the race whenever someone of the class won. They're like, well, I can't win my class now, so I'm out. I think a top 100 would help a lot with that. And then just a race participation, like finishing the race, like even it wasn't even timed, like maybe 8 hours or something, but just getting someone like any cosmetic reward just to like dip your toes in. Because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who would enjoy the idea of getting into racing, but like there's just like maybe they don't even know that they would like racing, and the first time they try it, it hooks them. But there's like no casual incentive. Like, and when I say casual, I mean like people like me and Miso who like obviously like someone who can't clear the campaign or is really slow is never going to get into races. But people who observe it from afar, there's no like it's really only the competitive people that try it. What are your thoughts, Crimson, on just like again this most recent race? I didn't actually look at the numbers in terms of participation, but when I looked at the top 100, I was shocked at how many people dropped out early on.
So we're in a weird spot for like the core contingent of the racing community is in a weird spot right now. For a couple of reasons. So we can just talk about like race stuff generally. The short answer is like this race 1, season 4 race 1 was an all-time low for finishers. Measuring participants is really hard because we don't know, like, for example, if you look at the ladder, there are 1,000 characters on ladder. However, a decent number of people are dropping out at level 2 or level 5 or level 10. And we don't know if those people were intending to race or if they just created the character when they meant to create a Fate of the Vol character or a standard character, and they just saw the banner and clicked on it. In terms of finishers, though, we had 35 finishers, which is really, really low. Part of the problem is that the core contingent of racers have a couple of complaints, and we can go through them in a really non-specific order. One is the prize for winning your class is a Demigod's Virtue Helm, and it's been the same cosmetic for 4 patches in a row now. Obviously, we would all prefer if the devs spend more time working on stuff that affects a much broader spectrum of people than the player base of like elite racers. There are like 20 people this affects, whereas there are like hundreds of thousands of people league starting. That said, from the core racer perspective, if you already have 3 demis and there's no monetary prize and there's no anything else that you care about, then like why dedicate 200 hours this patch to learning all the new layouts and staying up with the meta and doing all that if you already have the helm? There's another piece of frustration, which is this is hard to measure quantifiably, but it appears really significant that if you are farther from North America, the way that the like authoritative instance server works is that if you're in Germany and you're playing on the Frankfurt server, when you try to load a new zone, the Frankfurt localhost server connects with an instance server that's in Texas, and then that instance server sends information to Frankfurt and then to you. And that means that per zone, you have, it's hard to measure and it varies person to person and region to region, but a couple extra seconds of loading screen per zone. And across the entire campaign with 50 or 60 zones, this can be a 3 or 4 minute disadvantage, which is really sizable at the rank 1 level. That's a big deal. So there are some people who are frustrated by the idea that there are loading screen diffs, and as we get closer and closer and closer to everyone performing optimally, that becomes a bigger and bigger fraction of the player-to-player difference. So there are people who are frustrated about that. The other thing is that ExileCon was announced, but we don't know anything about the qualifier format yet. So a lot of people dove super deep into prep, and then we got no information about like when ExileCon qualifiers would be, and they kept grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding for weeks, and then doing fancy advanced speedrunner map discovery stuff, which is intellectually intensive and exhausting to do, and is not everyone's favorite part of playing the game. And then these races weren't ExileCon qualifiers, and people were feeling burnt out, so they were like, there's a Last Epoch League launch at the same time that I would have more fun playing. So like, I already have a demi. This isn't qualifiers for the thing that I care about. I'm feeling kind of burnt out. I'd rather play something else. There is definitely a through line from the broader community, especially from people who are pretty proficient in the game, but probably wouldn't win the races of like, why no top 100, why no finisher reward, why no participant thing. And the line from GGG on that has been that these races are for the elite, and we want the best of the best, and this is a showcase of the best of the best. And maybe in the future we could have other things which are more community oriented, a la PoE1 challenges or a la old racing seasons like we had in PoE1, and those will come in the future, and the broader participation rewards for doing kooky stuff will come through that avenue. But this is the line from GGG, but these are intended to be for the best of the best. And right now I feel pretty frustrated that there's a mismatch where you, quite rightly, in the broader community are like, I want fun incentive thing, and that avenue doesn't exist for the broader player base, and we only get this narrower thing. That mismatch leads to some resentment that I wish weren't there. And I agree that a participation reward, or like, for me, what I proposed when I was talking to people was like, the first benchmark for a lot of people who are first getting into practicing faster campaign is to kill Geonor in under an hour. So like, why not time gate some shorter incentive where like, if you take any reasonably competent player who's played a couple of league starts and have them watch a couple of YouTube videos, and their first 2 or 3 days of practice, the first milestone they'll get is a 59-minute Geonor kill. So like, something you can get in a day or two of practice. Why not that? And the line was, we hear you, this is on purpose, it's going to stay this way. In the longer arc of PoE, maybe we'll move in some other direction, but we don't know yet. And that's been the line, so.
That's unfortunate. I would like to see that change, because to me, it's like the idea that like the next Ngormus could be under the like out there, but he has no incentive to do his next race, the first race, right? Like you have to give them that little tease of getting them first into it, and I think getting people into the competitive space is always healthy for competitive games. The more people that are playing it, like it's always better.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're signing up for races because of a silly hat, you're probably not a rank 1 player, because you got to be in it for the love of the game. Like,
oh, for sure.
Like, I don't think the next Angormus is out there being like, damn, I really need a silly hat in order to lock in. Like, you have to enjoy the work itself. And I think
you'd be surprised at how many people that initial pool, because there might be just people out there that don't even like, who are like again, this is like someone who's like a very like rare person. They're like, but there could be a person out there who likes playing PoE2, but is a professional speedrunner in another game and would never consider speedrunning an ARPG because like they don't think it would be fun for them.
Yeah.
But then they finally dipped into. It's a very unique type of player.
Sure.
This wouldn't be generalized for sure.
You know, now that I think about it, maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe you do discover that you really like it.
That's what I mean. It's like, it would give somebody that avenue before. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It wouldn't be necessarily like, yeah, the odds of the next Gormus being out there is, you're right, very, very low. But it's
And
about spreading the joy of speedrunning, which I think you guys, can agree would be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And it could be like a situation like you, where you're watching somebody and you're like, hey, this guy, is doing this. This is super impressive. And you're like, wait, I feel like I could kind of beat this person. Or it's like,
Yeah.
but in this situation, it's like, wait a second. I just tried doing this because they gave me an incentive, but I realized that I'm better than I thought I was. And you're like, and then at that point, you kind of like, wait, maybe this could be a thing. So I do think that there is merit to having some sort of reward or incentive for, more casual players. And it doesn't even have to be anything that like, takes a lot of time in there. It could literally just be like a reskin of something else. Like you change the color of like an existing cosmetic, and it's like, here's a special limited edition for anybody who's done this race before, and it could be really cool. It makes me like think about like, and this is definitely like on a completely different spectrum, but like, things that I thought were really cool. One, of course, Ziz's Gauntlet, where if you go and just kill Hillick, right, you get the glove, which I have no interest in doing the gauntlet, but I will log in to go kill Hillick just to get the gloves, because it's like very low effort, very easy, something I can get for just participating. But also it kind of makes me think about like the second Win League, because the second Win League had bounties that was really cool. So it's like, maybe you're not the player to go for the first prize, like the top prize, but if there's like a cool bounty, it's like, hey, the first person to kill Jamon Ra with thorns, right? That's like, hey, I could potentially do that. That pool of people is not that high. The top racers are probably not going for that. So there's a chance that I could be that. So having like cool little like side quests for people to kind of take, and do could be like another cool avenue where it's like, hey, these guys aren't racing for number one, but they might be racing for something else.
I've always thought that it would be cool to take a lot of super high knowledge crafting players and have a crafting competition where I give you a white base and a specific set of mods you have to hit, and you have to do it in as few crafting steps as possible. So like, in what order you do things matters, because you have to figure out the optimal minimum number of steps to get from this to that. But there are a bunch of cool things like that, like on the idea of alternate art or like alternate colors for different things. I've proposed a silly community event to GGG. I pitch this every time that someone will listen to me, where the idea is people talk about campaign skip all the time, and I'm like, okay, there's this meme in ARPGs broadly, Path of Exile, Last Epoch, Grim Dawn, Diablo, whatever, where people keep joking like, why are there doors in the dungeons, and I hate campaign and I want it to be more smooth lined. And there's this copy pasta in the Diablo community of like, the perfect game is an infinite straight hallway full of monsters with no doors, and I have a loot pet, and all I must do is kill. And so the idea was like, what if you took a straight line map like Ravine, and then the entire campaign, every single zone was just Ravine. So like, you complete this thing, you free sin, you go into the next thing. Instead of the Grim Tangle, it's Ravine. Instead of the cemetery, it's Ravine. Instead
I think
of
they
the
had
concert,
this
it's Ravine.
back in Poe 1. It was called Infinite Ledge.
Yeah, Endless Ledge, exactly. And so the joke was of really long Ravine as a level race to like level 65, the equivalent of doing the full campaign and being fully leveled up. And at GGG, some people at GGG think that the idea is hilarious and are down for it. It's just, we would rather dedicate dev resources to getting the game out, which I totally understand. But the pitch that I proposed for the prize for that was, if you get to level 65 under the time threshold, you get a currency item that uses the reliquary unique code to turn an item red. Because hollow and foil items are just alternate color. So why not make that a currency item that turns your favorite chest piece, your favorite rare item, red? Because I'm Crimson and it's my event, so it's a Crimson Orb. This was the idea. They were less receptive to that part of the pitch.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm cool for all that stuff. That stuff gets a little bit more out there, but those are fun events. Like I hope that, yeah, I mean, a lot of like what we're talking about and complaining about, we also just have to put in the perspective that this is an early access game. So the fact that in early access we're getting races at all is probably pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, just wanted to throw that out there, but it's feedback. It's just feedback to the developers, what we might want to see down the line when 1.0 comes out. Because when the game's free to play, that's a whole new audience of people that could potentially be into these mini events. I love these kind of fun events. I'm one of the few people that really liked that battle royale they made in PoE 1. So like, I love them. I love goofy stuff like that.
Mhm. And I think that we were saying this in our little mini discussion earlier before the pod yesterday that this is something that's already really cool, not only because it's just early access, but I think that they are probably supporting the racing community more than any other ARPG out there. And
By a lot.
Yeah, by a lot. And it seems like they're going to continue to support it more and expand upon it more because this latest race, I think they had a new thing where it was like there's like a spectator mode that I don't think existed before this race.
It's existed since 0.1, but it keeps getting more and more feature rich.
Okay, got it.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, because I recently, the back end of racing, we could talk about this because the audience may find it interesting. That spectator tool is really interesting. It only works inside of race leagues. I am sure that people at GGG, like devs, can spectate your client in the main thing. I have been told that. I'm just speculating. But in order for me to have access to that tool, because I'm helping host the race this weekend, it's not a permission that they added to my main account. They gave me a new account.
I've had that happen before. Yeah, tournament accounts.
Which...
we did a hideout showcase contest, and we ran into a lot of issues where like the only way we can see other people's hideouts efficiently is if we see YouTube videos of it or we're there in person, which is just too much to manage. So I ended up emailing them for like a tournament account that has access to all the cosmetics, because I can't, like, if you give me your hideout layout and I download it and I don't own your cosmetics, your hideout breaks. So tournament accounts can be very useful in those senses.
Yeah. I mean, and to be clear, the back end of races is run by a couple of people at GGG who, one of whom I'm thinking of in particular, I don't know if she wants her name out there as like a public figure, but long story short, before she worked at GGG, she was a PoE 1 racer and like Gauntlet participant before she worked there. So there are definitely people on the other side of the player dev boundary who are spiritually brothers and sisters at arms with us, of like really wanting racing and liking stuff. And like, from what I understand, Mark himself really enjoys like the races and like is passionate about it and cares. And like, so it's very much not us against the devs. Like, there are definitely people at GGG who care about this. It's just a matter of like man hours and dev time allocation where there will be more support in the future and cool things will happen, and it's just a matter of the opportunity cost right now where we are in early access. So, and to be clear, like, the only reason I'm playing PoE 2 at all is because the races exist, and nothing like that exists in the Diablo franchise, period, despite Diablo 2 in particular having like a 25 year of people doing competitive ladder starts, and there are hugely optimized speedrun routes for every class in that game. And in my mind, the pinnacle of ARPG speedrunning is the Sorceress any percent normal world record in Diablo 2. But Blizzard has never done anything to support that.
Never, by the way. And what's hilarious is Heroes of the Storm has been like discontinued or whatever, like shut down as like a production team for years. But Heroes is getting a BlizzCon tournament this year, despite the fact it's not being developed anymore. Yet Diablo, no iteration of Diablo has ever had a race. And as far as I can, like, I know there's been Warcraft 2 tournaments, there's been Warcraft 3 tournaments, like StarCraft 1 and 2. I don't think there's ever been a Diablo race hosted at BlizzCon.
Not to my knowledge. There have been very small things that have been hosted as one-off events with Blizzard like sanctioning, but the idea of like hiring streamers who are game experts to be the hosts and doing production and doing it as an invitational of top speedrunners and having a reward for it, I don't think that that's ever happened in Diablo history, and I really wish that it did. I mean, and I've I've reached out to community team for Diablo 4 and not gotten a response to my email, whereas GGG, you can message people and get responses the same day most of the time, no matter who you are. So,
did you want to talk about the problems that this specific race had with? That was a previous problem with the Abyss League race. First, I think it was the first Abyss League race, right? That had the same effect happen to it.
It wasn't quite the same thing, but to give people some like orientation for anyone in the listening audience who doesn't know, if you interact with the league mechanic while you're playing through the campaign, you get deterministic rewards, most of which are currency, skill, and support gems. So as an example, throughout the course of Act 1, if you like full cleared everything, you would get 2 transmutes, a level 2, 3, 4, and 5 skill gem, a white amulet, a pair of runes, an artificer's orb, a regal, an alch, and 2 exalts. So that's a pretty big floor for your currency to have, right? It helps your skill gem protection. It helps you have a little bit of the slightly rarer currencies in Act 1. And in Season 4, Race 1, the one that was last week, or this week, I guess, a couple days ago, the league mechanic literally was not in the race environment. So what that means is that the spread between people who had good and bad vendor and drop RNG was really large, because ordinarily what the league mechanic currency does is just sort of push you up if you're having a really bad run in terms of drops, because getting a couple extra regals, exalts, and alchs helps you craft 2 or 3 more weapons. And so if you get your first one's bad, you can spend some extra currency to dump into that. So we saw the spread of super high skilled racers, the times were a little bit more spread out than we used to, and that was a mistake, and it was clearly communicated to racers before the race that this would be in there, and then it wasn't. And that was a big deal. I personally had a very unenjoyable race, and a couple of top 5 caliber racers. I'm thinking of a player named Screws in particular. Screws is definitely good enough to like outright win a race. Screws is like a very, very good player, and got to Cemetery where you're supposed to get a deterministic regal, and that regal is a huge deal for a lot of weapon-based builds where you need to be crafting weapon upgrades throughout the entire run. And if you get no regal drops, you're just owned. You don't get to play the game. And so Screws like dropped out, and other people were very upset. I was very upset. I was pretty firmly disappointed, is the way I will say it. My VOD is not public, but I was saying frustrated things. What happened in the previous race league, though, in the Season 3 races in O.3, was much smaller and much easier to adapt to. Which was... if you cleared your first abyss at the very beginning of the campaign, you just full clear any abyss. You could talk to an NPC named Mortimer in the Clearfell encampment, and he would give you a single level 1 support gem, which was a part of people's skill builds. And for some builds, that really matters in terms of like getting your damage online early. This doesn't really matter in like the league start setting where like, oh no, I don't have 1 support gem. I have to like hope I get a drop at some point. Whereas in the race setting, the difference between getting like first and third can be like, I have 30% less damage than I expect to, so clearing mobs takes 2 hits instead of 1. So I'm standing still for an extra 20 seconds per zone until that problem is fixed. And that's a 3-minute difference in Act 1, and now I'm out of the running because I can't make up 3 minutes against the leaders. And so there's definitely something to be said for like, if we just knew that that wasn't going to happen, people's build plans would have been different. I definitely agree with some people in the audience who said like, yeah, but this is just a showcase of your ability to adapt. Yeah, but I can't adapt if I literally don't have a regal. Like, if someone randomly drops a 5 mod weapon and I randomly drop a 2 mod weapon and I just don't have any currency to craft it, they just have double my damage. Like, just screw me. I can't catch up. There's nothing I can do. So that was a problem. Fortunately, we know it will be fixed, and also we know that for forward-going race QA, that's been added to like a checklist that exists now. So this is just part of the flow of like early access stuff. It's also part of the reason that we have multiple races per cycle to account for this kind of thing, and also run to run RNG matters. So it was frustrating, but it's been fixed. We have 2 more races left in the cycle for people to feel like they've got a good shot at it. So I was much more frustrated on the day, but since talking to people about it, it seems like going forward it won't be a problem. So
That's good. I
I
mean,
love that dialogue.
I think how I explain it because the other day there was a viewer that was like, I don't really see the big deal about this, right? They're like, this doesn't seem like feels like your people are crying for no reason, but and maybe this is an extreme example and isn't like exactly like that, but what I was saying was, imagine being so I gave 2 examples, right? First one is, imagine being somebody who puts hundreds of hours into prepping for a race like this, and you expect certain things to happen at certain times. So you build your character around this, you build strategies, you build your character, you plan your tree, and you come up with these innovations potentially, and you spent hundreds of hours doing that potentially can revolve around hitting these breakpoints, right? Hitting these like deterministically, like, hey, at this point I'm gonna get a level 6 spirit gem, so that's gonna boost my damage by a certain amount, which allows me to do this sort of build that only works like with this thing. Imagine spending hundreds of hours doing this, and then all of a sudden, all that work that you did is just out the window because this thing happened. Maybe it's not as extreme as that, because maybe there isn't like, I don't know if people are building around like, hey, or like building strategies around expecting these things to happen, but that is like a potential thing that could happen, and that person's time and effort spent prepping for the race is just all gone out the window. Another example I had was like, imagine being an athlete. You're running 2,000 meters, right? And that's your race. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, last minute on the day of the race, they're like, hey guys, just kidding. It's not a 2,000 meter race anymore. It's a 2,400 meter race. Now, you as an athlete who practiced that 2,000 meter race for hundreds of hours, thinking about like, okay, well, at this point I might be running out of stamina, so I'm going to slow my pace down here, then go for like a final spurt at this time. Now it's completely out the window there as well. So it's like, that's like the level that I'm thinking about, like this being an issue, and like why I think it is a big deal.
So like a good, I'll give you 2 sort of illustrative examples of this, one of which is a bit silly. But the first example is that if you compare the current top 2 finishing classes of warrior and mercenary, in the warrior route, you really only need to craft 1 good shield, and the only thing you need for a shield to be good is it has to be the correct base type, which is a level 28 base called a rampart shield, and then it needs to hit a flat armor prefix. A perfect shield has flat armor and percent armor. And so what that means is if you have 2 regals and a couple of spare exalts, and you pick up 2 or 3 of those bases over the course of late act 2, you can transmute all of those and then augment all of those, and then whichever ones you get that hit a good prefix, you have 2 regals, and that gives you 2 chances to then hit the max win, which is the combination of percent and flat armor on your prefix. That's not that currency expensive as like a speedrun plan. In the case of crossbows, though, in Act 1, you will use the level 1, 4, 10 crossbow bases. In Act 2, you use the 16 and then again the 33. So you need to craft 5 weapons over the course of the run. 4 if you get the level 4 base early. And what that means is throughout the course of the entire run, if you just get no regals naturally, which is what happens to me in the run, then you have to disenchant for regal shards. And the audience member may be going like, so then you just disenchant for regal shards. Sure, now I can't sell any rares, so I have no gold to be able to gamble for rings, and rings are rare drops as well. I have no flat damage on rings, and then also I have to disenchant, and disenchanting itself is an action in town that takes 10 or 15 seconds per disenchant. I have to disenchant 5 or 6 times in order to get all the shards that I need. That means that I'm losing a minute and a half, and then I get 1 chance to craft a good crossbow instead of 2. And then I have less flat damage on rings anyways. So I'm losing a couple of minutes to the disenchant. I'm losing a couple of minutes to having the lower damage. I'm losing... And then I have fewer chances where if I just whiff on my regal and exalt slams, like if I just get bad modifiers, low tier modifiers, accuracy instead of flat damage, instead of having a second chance for a backup thing, I just get owned. And at the elite racer level, there are these there are particular bosses, the Super 7, the Supreme 7, where if you have damage over certain breakpoints, the way that you approach the fight changes. So, like, if you think of Chimera, for example, in Chimeral Wetlands in mid-Act 3, if you fight that boss, if you have a certain amount of physical damage on your crossbow, you can stun the boss before the boss flies up in the air and sits on those little stone stands. And what that means is that the boss then doesn't have 20 seconds of immunity of being on the stand. And that's a 20-second time save. The same thing is true of Viper when she goes in the air and imbues people's spears with poisons. She's completely immune during that phase. If you can stun her and kill her before she goes into that phase, it requires a certain amount of physical damage on your weapon to do the stun buildup to do that. And if you don't have the damage to do it, you just lose 40 seconds to someone who does. And so having this deterministic floor of currency allows you to like have a better chance and may determine which class you would play based on knowing Mercenary is the most currency and support gem hungry of all of the racing classes, which is probably the least. And so you would choose which, knowing the amount of currency that you're going to get in the race is bolstered by this floor is one of the main things that makes Mercenary competitive. And so if I had had forewarning that we were not going to have 2 extra Regals, 6 extra Exalts, 2 extra Alks throughout the run, I literally would have logged in Warrior or Sorceress instead of Mercenary, and it would have changed things there. And so there are approximately like those like damage threshold things by themselves add multiple minutes to the run, where like the difference between having 1800 tooltip and 2100 tooltip is like isn't, oh, I have 10% more damage, the fight ends 10% faster. It's like I can completely avoid an immunity phase, and that saves 40 seconds by itself. And across 6 or 7 bosses, that can add like multiple minutes. So
yeah,
that
if you look at
yeah.
If you look at the old Walkahall video, he did a video where he really showcased like the difference weapon modifiers can make on a boss fight. Like it can make a boss fight go from 10 seconds to a minute plus. Like the variance is huge. And I know there's always like the argument that I see from people that say like they're like pushing back on this is like, no matter what, there's drop RNG. Yes. Like no matter what, someone might win because they just had really good luck. More often than not, though, the skill player will find ways to win consistently. And determinism is important for these runs. Like, no one is saying that every speedrunner needs to have a way to perfectly craft a bow every time or a weapon every time, but that determinism is super important. And
well, I mean, the example that I always use when I'm talking to people is like, if I played one hand of poker against a professional poker player, against like Daniel Negreanu, I could beat him. In one hand, yeah, I have a chance of beating him. If I had to play 1,000 running average hands of poker against Phil Ivey or Daniel Negreanu, there is no universe in which my decision making is going to beat theirs, right? So the example is like responding to the RNG of like, do I get good or bad drops changes my currency allocation. Like a good example of this is if you get a level 16 crossbow that's good enough with a few modifiers, you don't spend your Regals and Exalts early, because if you wait and get a level 18 crossbow, that's the breakpoint at which +3 level of all projectile skills can occur as a suffix. And so if you can make it to a level 18 zone before crafting everything, there's a very small chance that you have an even larger win. But if I don't have a Regal to begin with, then I don't get to decide what to do in the good and bad RNG cases. I can't choose to spend this resource earlier than I usually would to respond to bad RNG, or hold on to it until later to make use of good RNG and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I hear the point. This is part of like the fact that there's drop RNG and all these variance problems is why I care so much about ExileCon qualifier formats, which really affect things. But yeah, no, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to have those deterministic rewards. Every single racer has every single zone reward memorized, and different classes go out of their way to hunt down the league mechanic in different zones because they need particular currency or particular skill gem levels or particular support gems to make things work. So I don't know. It makes a multiple minute difference to get stuff versus not. And that multiple minute difference is the difference between being first and being seventh. So
Do people typically do like strong boxes? Like, are there like any specific strong boxes people go for? Because I remember watching the race, and then I think Angormus was killing a strong box, and I'm like, huh, that's interesting. I would not have thought that you would go for a strong box in a race format.
it varies. The strong box you're probably thinking of, if you watch this most recent race, was Angormus found a yellow researcher's strongbox and had no currency
Yeah,
because no league mechanic. So like
exactly.
the
That's
chance
that's
to-
what I was thinking about. I was like, would Angormus have gone for that strong box if the league mechanic exists? Because that's the only reason why I would think he would even think about that, because he's struggling for currency because potentially the league mechanic wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's a good example, or like another. So in short, there are many variables that go into the decision to kill a strongbox. If it's a researcher's strongbox before like Halani Gates, you're almost certainly taking it regardless of class because it's quick to kill. You're at the very beginning of the run, your character is a bit stronger relative to the content, and that tapers over the course of the run. It also depends a little bit on build. So, for example, if you're playing Essence Strain Contagion and you find a strongbox that has multiple packs on it, that density actually helps you kill it faster because EDC chains faster through denser mobs. So it depends on the mods. If you ID a strongbox and it says additional unique item, you're taking that every time, like just every time, if it's early enough in the run. If you're super under leveled and it has magic packs on it, magic packs give 3.5 times the amount of experience of monsters of the same type. So it depends on like what type of strongbox it is, where it is in the run, whether you're over or under leveled, how currency poor you are, the item level of the zone, and whether or not the strongbox is like the type of strongbox, like a blacksmith's cache that can drop you weapon upgrades and you really need something. So it depends on all these variables, and that's the kind of responsiveness to RNG that I think is skillful and interesting. And
Agreed.
yeah. So like it depends. The short answer is if someone's a totally beginning runner and they show up in my Twitch chat and they ask me about this, I would explain like you're almost always taking researcher's strongbox until you're in the zoom go, I've hit the level I want to, now it's just a boss rush part of the run. And before that, while you're still crafting stuff, you're taking like every single researcher strongbox that shows up. And other than that, you're mostly taking them for like XP if you're a little bit behind your per zone XP target. But it varies. Like people's judgment on this varies, and that's part of the skill and nuance of racing. So it's a good question.
Yeah,
like
very good.
It would be interesting at a round table of people to ask them like, you're this level in this zone playing this class, this is your gear, here you see this strong box, are you taking it, yes or no? That would be a fascinating answer.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, that's cool. That's a perfect example of what you're talking about, where like like skillful reaction to RNG and stuff like that. Like that's where runners make, that's where the skill expression is shown, and that's how you save time or adapt from race to race. You get that consistency. It's those little knowledge edges.
For sure.
Like the fact that even able to break it down, so like if it's before Halani's gates, like you have it mapped out so well that it's always impressive.
I mean, like, this is something that's like kind of silly, but like memorizing item level breakpoints for modifiers you care about matters in discussions like that, where you're like, well, if it's above item level 8, then I can get gloves that have 5 to 9 fire instead of 2 to 3 fire. And so that means that there's a chance that I can triple the flat damage on my gloves because the zone level of the... Like, it all ends up mattering. So I like that. I like that part of the... That's the part of speedrunning that I find really cool, of like figuring out how all these game systems press on you in a moment where you have to make... You're running past the strong box, you have 5 seconds to decide, are you going to click on it or not? So
cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the ExileCon qualifiers. I mean, just like I don't even know anything about ExileCon qualifiers. This will be my first time like participating in an ExileCon myself. So like just like from a noob's perspective, can you explain like
Sure.
what we know about what's happening with ExileCon? And yeah.
Sure. So we don't know anything about qualifier format publicly. The way that it's worked in the past is that it was sort of the Wild West for the first ExileCon. There were qualifier formats; those were all online races. All of them had different formats. So, like, I think one was like an endgame boss rush, one was a campaign race, one was one the top two people would qualify, another one the only top one person would qualify, um, and those were very different. But we don't know anything about the current qualifier format for PoE 2. But the prize pool for winning ExileCon last time was first place would get 10,000 US dollars, second place I believe would get 5,000, and the other people would get a participation reward. So merely qualifying you would earn like $2,000. We don't know, there's been no prize pool announced, there's been no format announced, but there are a couple of things that are possible and are interesting to discuss. And so I'm curious for like Twitch chat and YouTube comment feedback on this thought. So there's this loading screen diff that I talked about, and there's some possibility that GGG like has a way to measure the length of your loading screen and can subtract that from your runtime. But if they can't do that, then North American players have an inherent advantage against the rest of the world. Depending where you are, it could be a 1 minute advantage, it could be a 5 minute advantage, but it's measurable and it's significant. So the idea was like, what if they had a regional qualifier format? So like European players, there's one dedicated slot for the top European qualifier or African qualifier. You do it by time zones in vertical slices. And so you'd go, we're going to have a race where the top finisher from Europe or Africa gets a slot. The top finisher from Asia and Oceania gets a slot. And the top finisher from the America gets a slot. And then the world at large gets a slot. Like, that may mean that you could be the second or third best player in the world and not get a slot because you finished because there are dedicated slots for other regions. But it also means that you could be the best player in the world and on a laggier server, and it could be more fair for you. So it depends. If we can't do lag compensation, this is an interesting format. Right now, the idea of like one Americas, one Europe and Africa, and one Asia Oceania slot roughly lines up with who we think are the best in the world players. So that would be really interesting, along with a fourth at-large thing. So I'm curious, like, do people think that that sounds cool as a method of compensating for lag? The idea right now is that European players are probably playing at a 2-minute disadvantage, and Asia Oceania players are probably playing at like a 3-minute or 4-minute disadvantage. So it may compensate for that. The other question is, like, what if we had a system where they had an open qualifier, which then, say you take the top 20 people from an open qualifier, and then you have quote-unquote finalists, which would still be an online format race, but would allow the audience to like learn more about a smaller pool of elite competitors, and that way you'd get more insight into people's builds. Instead of the current system where we have like 1,000 participants on main race, and as caster it's impossible to keep up with stuff. So what if there were a tiered open qualifier and then closed qualifier and then finalists go to New Zealand? There are a bunch of questions as well about like what people want the race format itself to be. Do we want it to be Tavakai kill? Do we want it to be Arbiter kill? Do we want it to be hardcore or softcore? For anyone who doesn't know, the races right now are like semi-softcore, where if you die, you're forced to stand still for 2.5 minutes. Is 2.5 minutes the correct penalty? Do we want it to be 0 minutes? Do we want it to be 1? Do we want it to be hardcore? Like, right now, some of the racers think that the minimal interest from the audience in watching the races is because any percent Tavakai kill is like really dissimilar to a league start. So what if we made it like, you have to do all side quests, you have to be level 60, and you have to clear a white tier 1 map, and that's the race. And that way it's like more realistic simulation of the league start meta. So there are all these different questions, and we could talk about any one of them, but I'm curious, like, for non-racers in Twitch chat or YouTube comments, or for you guys, like, what sounds interesting to watch if you're not going to participate?
It's interesting because I didn't realize that the old qualifier had like different types of races, like a boss rush, and like that's interesting to take into account. I think it's very bad if they can't solve this time gap difference between the regions. I feel like that is like the number one problem I see right now. That's very like that's sad. I hope there's a way that they can like globalize, like if you set up the race servers for each region in their regions, but then you make it pull into a global ladder somehow for all three of them. Like there has to be some way to solve that lag. I don't hate your idea about the regional qualifiers, but I feel like that's like the desperate worst case scenario where like we can't solve this lag problem. And that's crazy to me that there can be a 5 minute difference between Oceanic servers and North America servers. Like that is like that jeopardizes like the competitive integrity or whatever, right? Like that's bad.
5 minutes is like a very heuristic estimate. Measuring this super precisely is really hard because we don't know what amount of lag exists that is caused by like your shader cache is slower because your PC has a smaller RAM size, or you're operating on an AMD chip that has a larger L3 cache and I'm playing on an Intel chip that has a smaller cache, and so cache loading affects your zone loading versus this other stuff. The estimate of like 1 to 3 seconds per zone being the gap size, and there being about 60 zones in the campaign right now, implies a 1 to 3 minute gap, but it's hard to really exactly measure on how much of that is caused by server and how much of that is caused by your machine. In either case, it's unfair, and I want the best players to get there. The other thing that I want to mention, though, about the regional qualifier idea is that it creates cool narrative stuff as a viewer, where, like, I don't feel any investment, I don't know who to root for. Well, I mean, I'm rooting for the guy from my region. Like, that's always been a thing in esports that, like,
absolutely,
if you're Mongolian, you root for the Mongols in Counter-Strike. If you're American, you're hoping that the NA Dota team makes it the whole way. If you're Chinese, you're rooting for PSGL GD and TI8. Like, that's a big factor that I think maybe some viewers would find it super engaging to know that their countryman has a shot.
Agreed. I think regional qualify like from like a narrative perspective, it is awesome to have. Yeah, so I'm not against it from that perspective. It just sucks that the lags there. Yeah, for me, like just to be getting more engaged in watching in it, man, I don't know what format. I do think Tavakai is really fucking boring, and especially like not for someone like me, but like for someone who's like generally a casual player, like that is a really weird stopping point. Because like you said, like that's not the end of the game. And what's weird to think about is we're actually getting Act 5 and Act 6 soon, so it's like, you know, when are we getting those in terms of the qualifier timing? What happens if we have Act 5 by the time the ExileCon qualifiers come out? What happens if we have the full campaign by then, which I don't think we would have, but it's interesting what the stop point should be from a perspective of the viewer. Because I'm sure the player perspective, I don't know actually how much you would care about where the endpoint is if it did end up being Arbiter or if it was Tabakai, like how much that impacts you as the speedrunner. But for me as the viewer, I don't think I like either of them makes me more excited in my
What are your
head.
thoughts, Misa? Do you care about softcore hardcore? Do you care about format?
Personally, no, I don't really care too much about it. I think that's more of a thing for the racers and maybe like what you guys like running. For us, we just like seeing a good competition. I think that's the most important thing. A fair, good competition with very high skilled players who are, there's not like this person is definitely gonna win and nobody else has a chance or whatever. Like it's just having a good competition and having it be entertaining, good casters, things like that. I think those are the most important things to us as spectators, compared to the actual format. I do think it could be like in my mind, it could be cool to have different ones. Like it's not just like always up to Tavakai. Some races are going to be, up to maps. Some races are going to be Arbiter. But so having variety is interesting to watch, but at the same time, is it really a make or break for it? Not really. It's going to add like slight more entertainment value, but in general, it's just more about competition. And I think that's probably the case for most people. I would imagine.
I actually dislike variety as an option just because, like, to me, like, maybe the competitor standpoint feels a little bit the same, but to me, it's like, if the actual ExileCon race, let's say the finals, right, the grand finals was killing Arbiter, but then you had people who were qualifying by killing Tabakai or more specialized type of races, there may not be as good as those races as they were as Arbiter killing. So, like, if the finals is like killing Arbiter, like, in my head, like, I guess it's just someone who's organized tournaments for other esports before. Like, the qualifiers have to be the same format as the finals for me for competitive, like,
Oh yeah,
not
yeah,
integrity,
yeah.
maybe competitive. That's where I get a little bit concerned about, like, if it's a Tabakai kill or a boss rush, like, those are almost maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but, like, to me, like, I don't know if, like, the same player would be able to, like, someone's probably better at Arbiter rushing than potentially better at, like, a weird off challenge. So someone might qualify that's not necessarily as good as the others. Maybe I'm wrong though.
It depends. So, like, a good example of this is that there are some players who are incredibly good PoE1 players, but haven't dedicated their time to campaign map layouts, which makes a 20-minute difference. But
I also
like, I'll
think
use
classes make a difference too, because
yeah,
different
yeah,
classes have different power spikes. So if you take it
yeah.
all the way to maps or like to Arbiter, maybe potentially the Warrior might fall off a little bit more because like speed clearing through maps, I don't think that's like the Warrior's strength and
Yeah.
something compared to
That's a good
something
point.
else.
Yeah, I mean, like, it is interesting to think, like, right now in campaign races, players like I'm Exile and Havoc and other PoE1 super all-time great people, some of them haven't, like, locked in on PoE2 map layouts, but definitely have, like, the mechanical skill and the game knowledge to compete on the other fronts, on the boss killing, on the crafting, on the everything else. And if you include maps all the way to Arbiter, the campaign segment matters less and the overall game skill matters more because there's just simply a larger fraction of the race where you're not in campaign. And so it would allow for different player archetypes to compete more.
I
And
also
I
think
think that for some viewers may be interesting. Although I think the map reading skillfulness stuff is some of the more interesting aspect of PoE2 racing. So
I also think at the moment where we have the game, going to Arbiter is a little bit not realistic because there's so much RNG that goes into finding your first Arbiter that, that it could just happen to where somebody just gets lucky and they find the Arbiter really quickly and they're like, well, I guess I win because of that. Like,
Yeah, you'd have to have
and
citadels revealed from the start of, like, getting the
yeah,
map.
fortunately, that kind of thing is really easy to fix. One, everyone would have the same Atlas seed, and two, you could, like, either tell racers there's going to be one at 12 o'clock and one at 9 o'clock and one at 3 o'clock. Good luck. Or you can do various other things like fully revealed citadels. Like, solving the RNG, where are they in your Atlas thing is really easy. You just, the level design devs have the ability to force specific layout seeds and specific Atlas seeds onto everyone in the race environment. Like, in the current race environment, everyone has literally the same layouts, which matters a lot for fairness. Because, for example, the fastest and slowest red veils on a good build are about 1 minute and 10 seconds apart in terms of their overall speed. So everyone having the same layout is, like, very easy to solve. That's already a solved problem.
good. Yeah. But I would definitely imagine like what you were saying earlier, Cal, about like how if this was you do the qualifiers for like ExileCon and then when you get to ExileCon, like I would imagine that's be like a series and you would keep it like, hey, if that's gonna be the Tavakai for qualifiers, it's gonna be Tavakai for the actual like, main finals as well. And speaking of like that versus like going to maps, like I think maybe potentially one of the and I could be completely wrong about this. One of the potential reasons why it's to Tavakai and not through interludes is that they're like interludes is just a stopgap right now. It's not really a real act, and maybe GG doesn't want that to be as a part of the race. I don't know.
I definitely do, because seeing new strategies emerge is some of the coolest stuff as a participant and as a host and as a viewer and as a fan. And then also, like, the interludes are particularly interesting because you can do them in any order. And they have very different rewards. right? Like, do I do the Holton quest line first to get all the greater runes and fix all my resistances? Do I do the like Sekima's quest line first in order to get all those passive points and rare rings and amulet? Do I do the Doriani quest line first in order to get my unique item and fix my resistances? Like, I don't know. Like, there are a bunch of interesting things of like, what order do you do things? Is a very interesting question in the interludes. I kind of hope that is the format. Like, I find that fascinating.
One question I have is, how long are the average races? Like, how long was the ExileCon race? Because one thing to keep in mind when you're doing count is a production event, right? You can't have 4 streamers or 4 players on stage for 12 hours, right? Doing like all the Uber boss races, right? Like, there has to be like a time frame. What is your answer for like what is the longest you would be willing to compete? Because I'm sure that's where GGG is trying to end to. Oh, so you could okay. So you don't care if they did a 12-hour race on ExileCon stage, you wouldn't care.
If it were a hardcore SSF race to level 100, like on standard league with every single person starts with negative 100 item rarity and no currency and it's white items only and it's going to take me 6 days. Like, sure, I don't like, go ahead. Like, whatever. I don't care. I'm a log in. I tend to prefer formats that are around the 2 to 3 hour mark because playing super efficiently is, you know, I relate it to like, this is such an American example. I relate it to taking the SAT. Your concentration only lasts so long. If you walk out of that locked in environment after 2 or 3 hours, you feel fatigued even though you've been sitting still the whole time. So like a 2 to 3 hour format is about what I think is really good, both for the viewer and the racer. But in terms of like how long am I willing to compete, a good example of a speedrunner that does this is there's a speedrunner on Twitch named Nuki, and she does speedruns where she starts at the beginning of the Zelda franchise and runs to the end of the Zelda franchise. And this will be like 96 hours straight, no sleep, no meals.
Holy.
And like, that's, I mean, I'm not Nuki, but like people like that exist. You could find competitors for you need to kill Arbiter back to back on every single class from the beach. Like that's a thing people would sign up. If the prize
that's
is
more of a GGG question then. Like, how long does GGG want their production to run?
2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours. It's the ExileCon finals are almost certainly going to be some version of a campaign race. Whether that's Doriani or Tavakai or Act 6 if we have it by then, whether it's hardcore or softcore, whether we have long rigor mortis or short rigor mortis, that's the question in terms of the finals. In terms of the qualifiers, you can make them anything and people will log in.
So I guess that means the time of the event is determined by the player base, because if like Angormus gets his campaign cleared down to like 2 hours, you know, maybe they extend like if they want to hit that 3 hour mark, you know, it's like arbiter, right? Like so I guess that just depends on how often that if the goal is a 3 to 4 hour production event, then it's wherever the pros are landing at that time, I guess.
Yeah. It's going to be the finals are almost certainly going to be some version of a campaign run. So
I would imagine like end of Act 6, like because I have. Well, maybe not. I don't know if we'll have Act 6 by then. Like, we'll see. But yeah, a campaign run makes most sense for sure.
I personally hope that the stuff stays softcore with rigor mortis, but I'm curious, like hardcore.
Do you think that 2.5 is too long? Because that seems really long.
Yeah,
anytime I see someone die, I'm like, oh, you're out of the race. Like if you died once, it feels like 2.5 minutes is way too punishing.
Same.
60 seconds, maybe.
It was 60 seconds in 0.1 and 0.2. There was a transition to 2.5 minutes in 0.3. And Ziggy is sort of the bottleneck. Like, he's the person who's the go-between the racing community and GGG. And he took a bunch of community feedback to GGG, and the short answer was, like, some people like me really like short rigor mortis. Like, I think 1 to 2 minutes is pretty good. I think 2.5 is too long. And other people are like, if it's not hardcore, then like, why am I even logging in? Like, there's some top tier competitors who don't log into the current races at all because they're softcore. Like, if you want to farm some bastes on this, you could go to Karn. Karn is a big hardcore race enjoyer, and Karn is like, I would never race unless it's hardcore. The second they make it hardcore, Karn is logging in, and Karn would be a very high-end competitor. I don't know how much he knows about map layouts, but like his mechanics and his game knowledge and his and all the rest of it and his pedigree are really, really high end. So like, if you make it hardcore, you lose me, but you gain Karn. It depends who you want to watch. Like,
And I think that's why maybe some sort of variety is important, because certain players are going to be drawn towards certain type of competitions more than others.
Yeah.
I like that you said that though. I like that you're willing to say that if it goes to hardcore, you would lose me. That makes a lot of sense. I'm sure.
But
there's
you
a
gain
lot of people...
Karn. I mean, like it.
I mean, no, that's a good point.
Watch.
But I'm glad you're willing to say that though, because that's an honest opinion, and it's true. There's probably a lot of people that would not engage with it if it was true hardcore.
No, people ask like, Crimson, when would you retire and go to the commentary booth permanently? We like your commentary, and the answer is, if you make it hardcore, I'm logging out. Like, I'm not playing. The chance of me dying to a lag spike or a disconnect or a mechanic that I don't see or a weird animation or desync or something, I'm not playing hardcore online. I'll play hardcore on LAN. I don't care about that. Like, the second that desync and lag and stuff are not an issue, I'll play hardcore. I don't care about that. I play hardcore Diablo 2, but that's because you can play locally hosted offline Diablo 2. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Karn's probably. I haven't raced Karn or anything. I don't know his times, but Karn's probably a better player than me. Like, it's probably more entertaining to watch Karn. So.
Okay. Anything else we want? Oh, go ahead, Miso.
Yeah. No. Is anything else we want to discuss? Yes. Something that came up during that conversation that I wanted to talk about was, and you mentioned this, you're like, oh, well, do you want to go to Holton and do that quest line to get your runes to fix your gear and resistances? From a racer's perspective, what do you think about the rune system versus something like the crafting?
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, I need to indoctrinate you to a meme, okay? I need the broader content creator community to start pushing on this, okay? You have to help me. Item RNG is a big deal in races, as I'm sure you can imagine. Like, to give you the silliest example, if you take a level 16 varnished crossbow and you put a transmute on it and you hit the top possible roll of lightning damage that's possible at that item level, that affix provides more damage than the item base does. So, like, your damage literally more than doubles if you win your transmute. So there's then this perennial meme that we really want, not runes, but essences to solve this. Because essences are one of the game systems that don't have a tutorialization in the campaign. Freythorn tutorializes ritual, the Lightless Passage tutorializes abyss crafting, but there's no tutorialization zone for essences. And the idea has come up like a million times that if you just put a bunch of essences in Mod on Quarry and Mod on Mine, so I'm guaranteed a couple of resistance essences, the low-level ones, lesser essences. Essence of Abrasion, Essence of Grounding, Essence of Thawing, all the good low-level ones. And then you have Risu, the NPC that you save from the bottom of Quarry, tell you about essences. This tutorializes essences and stabilizes item RNG, which then means that the balance of Act 2 bosses, some of which are really easy and some of which are really hard, both in the racing and general league starting perspective, you can tune those bosses expecting a much more consistent amount of player power. So the meme is that racers have been like begging the level design team. We're in their DMs every day being like, please, an Essence of Abrasion in Mod on Mine. What we really mean is 10 essences in the mine and make it a tutorialization area like Freythorn is for Ritual. But, like, please, just put a bunch of essences early in Act 2. As far as runes, yeah, we could use some more blank runes. I like the blank rune system. The fact that throughout the entire campaign you only get 2 is crazy. Like, in Act 2, you get, like, a bajillion level 2 skill gems from Zarka for completing different zones. Make some of those blank runes. Like, I don't need all these support gems. You could take 2 of them away. You could give me some extra blank runes. That seems like a good system to me. But the meme on the, like, fixing your campaign gear stuff tends to be that. I also think that there's an argument that a system where if you salvage gear that has a rune in it, you get, like, a rune shard. So that way, if I put my lesser rune in my stuff, I get like 1/10 of a rune back out or 1/5 of a rune back out. Some system like that. I would need to see how it affects economy and trading and stuff for actual league start, but I would find that idea kind of interesting. So, like, long story short, I don't want no RNG, because responding to RNG is good and fun and it makes good drops exciting. But like a little bit overtuned on the RNG for me right now. A couple more essences, a couple more runes, especially in that transition from Act 1 to 2, those first couple of zones. That's where I want it. There have been a bunch of ideas about like where to put this that, trust me, the speedrunners are yelling at the level design team about this like every day. We're begging.
Oh, we're doing it too. Like I've been a big I mean, we've talked about blank runes 1,000 times on this podcast. We all think that was what my clip was for the try video, was saying that they just need to introduce more blank runes to the campaign, or just default. Like I think blank runes are a good solution, and I like yours. Like I'm glad you pointed out that there's only 2 blank runes you get from the campaign. Like only 2. Like that is ridiculous. It should be way more frequent. There should be like at least 1 to 2 per act, and that would, like, even that's probably still going to lead you to some bad RNG at times. So I do like your solution though of the shard fragments, but that just like anytime you add a fragment or anything to, like you said, it's the economy question becomes harder to answer. Then that makes it way harder to bring that.
I even like the idea of the system. You know how in buried shrines you can go to the elemental offering and get a ruby ring or a topaz ring or a sapphire ring, and each one of those comes with their corresponding rune type. The idea of, in Modern Mine, you choose between an essence of sorcery, an essence of enhancement, an essence of abrasion, or whatever other triptych you want to create there. I think that's just put that in the game.
Agreed. You know that's a good onboarding point.
Like, just put that in the game, man. Like, today, please. I want to have a client patch go live after this podcast where we have a bit more essences in Act 2. I think it would be more fun.
I wish we.
And then again, I'm saying this where like, yes, that is power creep for player power. I also want Act 2. If you're pushing up the floor of player power in this way, I want Act 2 bosses to be harder. They have cool mechanics. Make them harder.
Yeah. Always a interesting dance between player power and bosses. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of boss tweaks. And we know that campaign changes are coming, and we know that actually a lot of the campaign zones are still missing bosses, which is another thing to take into account, that like once these campaign zones eventually get these bosses, who knows what these bosses might drop. Maybe they'll start dropping blank runes, you know, who knows what's going to happen. Yep. But yeah, anything else you want to mention, Crimson, before we wrap it up?
No.
This was a fun talk, man. I'm super excited we had to have you on. If you guys are watching this, Crimson is casting the next race qualifier, and that is freaking awesome. Make sure you check them out. Make sure you share.
I'm casting the next race.
It's not qualifier. Race. Sorry, yes, it's not a qualifier. It's a race. Yes, sorry. But he is casting the next race, which is awesome. Literally 2 people do all the races, and he is the 3rd person getting to do it, which is like, that is so hard to break into. Like, big respect, congratulations, and I hope this leads to you getting more casting opportunities. If you do not qualify for ExileCon, I hope you're there as like a 3rd commentator as well. But I hope you just qualify there for it too.
I hope I qualify.
I just want you to win it. That'd be cool. But
I'm glad people like my commentary, but I always need to be like, I'm gonna qualify.
I'm a player first. I'm a player first.
I'm gonna win it.
Oh man, that's cool. That's cool. Let's move to build of the week. Let's start with Miso's. This is a more traditional build of the week, so let's just dive into yours.
Sure. So this build of the week is from a creator called Mazbro, and you know, this is a interesting build in the sense that I kind of picked it not because it does have a couple of unique mechanics, but when I look at the build, I'm just like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I cannot see anything that's going on the screen. The entire screen is mush, and all I know is it's doing a lot of damage, and there's some sort of cast on crit, cast on elemental stuff going on, and the bosses are melting.
That's so interesting. It looks like he's doing, it looks like he's triggering Doge Rays from the cast on, what I guess that's cast on crit, and then cast on elements shooting the fireballs. This is silly looking.
Yeah, like look at this. You can't see anything. Nothing is going. How are you able to make sense of anything? Visual clarity is at an all-time low with a build like this. You think you can't see anything with cast on crit comment? Well, wait till you see this build. Literally, the entire screen turns into just an absolute blur. It's pretty funny. It's pretty interesting. Its main driver of the build is Fireball. That is the thing that is doing most of the damage, and also it puts it uses thrashing vines
It looks
as well
hilarious.
as a part of the build. He mentioned like there are times where a spark actually there's like doesn't hit certain parts of the map, and thrashing vines is there to kind of like make up for it. But it's
Jesus.
yeah,
My eyes.
as a
intense.
speedrunner,
That is
I'm
awesome.
sure this is definitely very different from what you're normally expecting in the campaign.
Yeah, for real. I can this amount of visual clarity, I'd be like, I need to dodge the boss mechanic because I won't kill the boss in one hit. But this clearly would, so it's different.
No, this is cool. I love that, and yeah, it's not like it's a super crazy tech, but I love when you're activating via an activator to activate something else. Like,
Yeah.
it's a fun combo he's got going. He's not doing the same skill. Usually, it's like common in both. It's like okay, this is cool looking though.
Yeah, it's
Good job, man.
It's fireball. It's cast on death, or it's cast not cast on it's detonate dead, and also thrashing vines is in there as well. So kind of a cool little iteration for cast on crit, cast on element.
Is that a vine skin he has?
Yeah.
That's crazy looking.
Yeah, it's like these like mechanical tentacle thingies. It's pretty cool. Like the build itself has a couple cool mechanics going on for it, and he goes on about how like detonate dead is like such a strong skill while you're mapping, and even for temple as well. Like
Detonate
literally,
Dead's OP.
it's like an infinitely kind of in a way like an infinitely scaling type of ability.
See, when I see this, all I think, because I'm addicted to chain from terrain, is my favorite projectile mechanic. All I can think is like, man, if you were chaining from terrain, you'd have even more projectile bullet nonsense.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool build. Shout out. What's his name?
His name is Mazbro.
Yeah, if you're watching on the audio format, just click the video on YouTube and watch both of these build of the weeks, because both of them are showing something cool. But this is blind yourself real quick.
I like
with
this
it.
a lot.
This is definitely the worst visual clarity I've ever seen.
Yeah, this part is him doing it without fireball. He's trying to kind of showcase that, but
cool.
And he's showcasing like the detonate dead part. So really cool, really fun stuff. Again, just the visual clarity is at an all-time low with this build, and I love it.
Cool.
All right. Next up is Crimson.
Crimson's
Yeah, so I'm leaking some race tech that no one's debuted in a race yet. The basic idea, I'm explaining in the video, so you're welcome to link this snippet in the YouTube video description for the podcast. But the basic idea is that grenades are no longer the best racing build. It's just no one's had time to practice the best racing build. The best racing build centers on Glacial Bolt, which forms a little V of ice bolts. I'm explaining in the clip, so people will get more of this in the clip. But the basic idea is that it forms a little V of ice shards, and I'm firing the wrong skill there. So it forms this V of ice shards, and if you can find a way to automate the shattering of these, it does as much AoE self-overlapping damage as grenades do, but instantly detonating. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two at this point, someone showed up in Guy That Dies Twitch chat and was like, hey, if you put Frostbite support into ice shards, into Entangle, the druid spell, you can automate the shattering of ice shards, and you can completely blow up the entire screen. And it turns out that the actual effective single target DPS of this is as good as grenades, but with instant detonation. So it's easier to target instead of throwing your grenades and trying to kite the enemy into them. I've also been working on this as like a budget league starter potentially for next patch. If we don't get a new class, I might play this, where you take the lineage support On's Citadel, and you use Magnified Area 2, and you can clear entire screens with this all at once by having gigantic fissures of ice shards go out. So this clip is just me showing like how you would use it in a racing setting. It appears in the racing setting that this is actually like 20%. This is within the same damage range as good grenades, so like maybe a bit more. But you actually, if you're able to socket this with lineage supports, you can make this into a mapping build that I haven't seen anyone do yet. But it requires you putting the Frostbite support into Entangle, and then on Citadel and Upheaval and other Fissure-based supports into this for the mapping version. So I didn't have a gameplay clip for this, because this is like secret racing tech that no one has debuted in a race yet. But you might see this toward the top end of the race ladder this weekend, because it's viable on a couple of different classes, mostly Ranger, Monk, and Mercenary. But this is also possible as a racing build. So if you link this clip in the YouTube video description, it's an unlisted video, but people can see the on Citadel version and get an idea where you can really scale up the AoE clear of this and make this into a little bit of a slower mapping build, but one that's really budget. And I think it's kind of fun. So
That's cool.
And not grenades, so hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks for coming on, man. It was an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best of luck with your racing seasons up ahead, as well as your commentary coming up. If you have any shout outs you want to do, plug yourself. Now is the time.
So if people want to watch the races, twitch.tv/Path of Exile. I'll be co-hosting with Rise QT this weekend, just as a one-off thing, while Ziggy D has a personal obligation this weekend. And then the number one thing you can do to support me is that I'm on the push for Twitch Partner Plus. If I get 100 non-gift, non-prime subscribers this month, I get a different revenue split from Twitch, and we've been close the last couple of months to that Partner Plus. So if you like my content, or if you like racing and you want to hang out, the number one thing you can do is just subscribe on Twitch, twitch.tv/CrimsonCasts. A tier 1 for the next 3 months would be like the biggest deal to push me across that finish line, and would be an enormous deal. But obviously, if you just like hanging out, you can be in my Twitch chat or in my YouTube comments without paying. I don't think that anyone needs to pay. It's just the number one way to support right now, is that more so even than gifting subs or donating, is just a non-gift, non-prime tier 1 helps a huge amount. I'm on that grind for Plus. I'm sure the other streamers in here know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I don't, but I'm sure Miso does.
Yep. I don't have Plus either. I never like.
You don't have Plus? We got to get Miso Plus, boys. For anyone who doesn't know, if you reach 100 plus points, 1 point is a tier 1 sub, you get, if you do that 3 months in a row, you permanently get a 60-40 revenue split from Twitch instead of a 50-50. It's a big deal. It changes the revenue split for people on Twitch a lot. So,
and I think you can get like higher tiers of Plus for like up to like 70-30 or something like that. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It was an absolute blast. Miso, go ahead and do your thing.
Yeah. As per usual, streaming every night, twitch.tv/MisoXure. Gonna start doing some more Path of Exile stuff, I think, next week. I'm gonna be getting back into the Path of Exile streaming, because I'm expecting news to start trickling out as early as next week. So gonna get back into playing the game, practicing some campaign runs, maybe optimizing some league starter builds. It's gonna be a good time. So come hang out there. And then if you're listening to this podcast, you're on YouTube as well, probably twitch.tv/miso or youtube.com/misoextra as well. So come hang out. Gonna be a good time.
Cool. Next week, we will have Rabbit back, and I just got confirmation like a few hours ago. Haven't even told me to say it. Alcohol will be on next week's episode, so we did get Alcohol back. Last time he was on, the audio got kind of borked. It was unfortunate. It was still actually a really good episode, but we've been wanting to get him back. So Alcohol will be here next week. Rabbit will be here. So yeah, and we'll probably talk about the campaign and get Skip every week. Bye.
Bye.